So shall we begin? Is everyone ready? And I guess we should check if the translation, the interpretation is going in the other room. Is all okay? Okay.
In the meantime, if you don't have a drink in front of you, there might be some drinks outside. So make sure to get one because we will be drinking here, I heard, right?
Yeah. Any
日本語ルームですが、通訳の声聞こえています。通訳さんの声バッチリ聞こえてます。ありがとうございます。
Excellent. So it looks like we'll be able to hear some comments. So I thought, I'd like to start I think this would be a nice opportunity to start kind of this conversation with a little bit of Japanese sake.
Sounds
So this is from Kanda, and it is a aged Japanese sake, which should be pretty good. Thank you. And
They're drinking.
Yes. So let's try some of this. So the cups that we're drinking this out of are antique. They are about 300 years old from the Edo era of Japan. So it's kind of a nice thing from the past to try to enjoy some new Japanese sake. So
Excellent.
cheers.
Cheers.
It's nice and sweet.
It's very good.
So yeah, I guess, very happy that you're able to join us here in Japan in person. It's great to have these kind of conversations face to face. I have to ask, so far, what's been your favorite Japanese food?
You're going to be surprised, but yogurt. You have very good yogurts here, okay? And you have like real pieces of fruits in the yogurt, and it's delicious. So
The yogurt is very good, but it's not really Japanese food.
well, it's different from the yogurt in US. So
This is true. It is, to be fair, very good yogurt. Tonight we'll be going to yakitori, the grilled skewered chicken place. So
that's actually what I remember from my last trip, that yakitori were very good. And the last thing I did before leaving Japan is going to yakitori at the airport, because I figured even the airport food in Japan is going to be better than the food in US.
very true. The airport food is surprisingly good. So it's a good last chance to get some real Japanese food. And yeah, I think you'll like the yakitori even better than yogurt for
All
sure.
right. Looking forward to that.
So the last time you were in Japan, you talked a little bit about this in the keynote, but it was for the tech conference at Rakuten, right?
That's right. So last time I was here because Kawaguchi-san saw me speaking at the Agile Alliance conference and running a Lego and Chocolate game simulation about DevOps. And so he invited me to do the same thing at the Rakuten Technology Conference.
So at that time, of course, you talked about how you conducted the event. Did you get a chance to talk with any of the attendees despite the language barrier?
This is very difficult because, to my surprise, even though I heard that Rakuten introduced English for everyone, and I expected people at the Rakuten Technology Conference to speak English, to my surprise, very few of them did. So again, if it wasn't for Kawaguchi-san help, I don't know how I would have facilitated that session.
Well, that is a definite challenge in Japan, even today, having the, English and Japanese language barrier is pretty hard to overcome in my experience. Did you try a talk? How was your experience talking with attendees here this time? Any different?
Yes, I think this time around, people were trying harder to speak, but also were using tools to help them. So there were many people who used either a Google Translate or would type in their what they were trying to say to me and then read it back. So there was definitely a huge improvement from 10 years ago.
Definitely in 2015, there was not the Google Translate or any of that, especially not the audio translate as well. So, you know, it's almost 10 years since you've been back. Japan was pretty high tech back then, aside from, you know, we didn't have Google Translate. What's your impressions of the technology in Japan 10 years later?
Well, I'm gonna quote someone else. I don't remember who said that, but it's here, but it's not evenly distributed. Because some of the interesting experience that I had so far, thanks to Alex, seeing how going to different restaurants, you can order food using QR code system, and how the user experience of those QR code applications, it's not good. And sometimes you don't know if you ordered or if you haven't, or how many things you ordered multiple times. So I would say it's challenging, but maybe today it's going to be different.
Yeah, I hope we can definitely improve some of the technology here in Japan. Part of what DevOps Days and some of the related conferences are all about, helping people develop software faster and better. One thing that I think would be great is if we did have better QR code ordering systems that weren't as buggy in Japan. That would be nice.
So maybe for next year, how about organizing hackathon at the DevOps Days and have all these brilliant minds create an application that actually works?
An application for, I'm still going to say our best way to order food is a paper menu and sumimasen. But
no
sometimes
hackathon?
a hackathon would be great. And, maybe we can come up with a simple app too for that. Okay. So back then, I think compared to Rakuten is a very high tech company. I think you talked about this in the keynote, how they're English first and really are trying to be the latest technology for everything. At this conference, it's a lot more of the larger companies, maybe people who work for the systems integrators. From talking with some of the attendees here, did you get a different perspective on how they approach things like Agile or DevOps or other big software development processes like that?
Yeah, actually, there was one interesting survey that one of the exhibitors conducted, and that survey was like literally creating this diagram between the frequency of deployments for organizations and the lead time to deploy and the size of the organization. So I came to that stand at the very beginning, and I put my little green dot on the far right, indicating that the company that I'm working with right now is very slow in deployment. And I thought that I will be an outlier, that I will be the only one in that corner. But what was surprising to me when I came to that same stand today is that there were a lot of dots in that same area. So which tells me that there are many opportunities to improve.
I think that's great. And I know a lot of the talks here were a nice mix of kind of new technology, but also important things about culture change. I think some of the culture topics, it doesn't matter how much technology we have, new tools, it's really hard to get teams to collaborate. That's a big thing that the Lego and chocolate game that you talked about in the keynote is all about. When I first heard about a game about Lego and chocolate, it was kind of strange, right? It doesn't seem like there's any relation to DevOps. You mentioned it in the keynote, but can you give me again an overview of why Legos? Why is Legos a good analogy for this?
Yeah, absolutely. So initially, I didn't have Lego in that game. I only had chocolate. And so when I ran it first, it was okay. Then when I ran it with people who were more familiar with gamification, and the feedback they gave me is that when you only have chocolate, so people literally packing it into packages to simulate the development, it actually simulates manufacturing more than development, because it's literally about putting something together. There is no creativity. So by adding Lego, it became much closer metaphor for software development, because now people in that simulation had to actually create something in response to the request from the business. And business would come up with something like, we want 5 dogs or 10 giraffes. And the part of the game is that there are no specifications how the dog or giraffe needs to look like. And teams actually have to talk to the customer. They have to ask, so what kind of dog do you want? What kind of color do you want in that dog? And if they don't ask that and they deliver something that doesn't meet the customer's requirements or customer's expectations and needs, then the customer is not going to pay. And so it's very real simulation. But again, the point of Lego is enabling creativity and getting much closer metaphor for product development.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I guess, I don't know if this was an issue with the chocolate game, but it sounded like it was all about trying to pack chocolates in a box. I think I would have a very creative solution when too many wouldn't fit. Just kind of make one disappear very quickly by eating it.
So funny you should mention that, because I always bring more chocolate so people can eat it. The reason being is that one of the principles that I kept in mind while developing this game is how our memories work. And so how our brain works. And usually our memories are much stronger if they are connected to something emotional. And if there is a pleasant emotion, and also when we involve multiple senses. And so if you're learning something and there is this nice smell of dark chocolate, and then the taste of dark chocolate, so you'll remember those learnings much better.
Oh, that's a great idea. And maybe it's more tasty than Legos too.
I don't know. Haven't seen anyone trying the Legos, so.
I guess with the Lego game, when you had conducted that back then, was it challenging to get the teams to communicate despite the language barrier?
No, because once people understood the rules of the game, it's a simulation. So they communicate with each other, and the game is developed in such a way that they have certain rules that they need to follow, and then opportunities for them to improve. So in the first round, there are specific, very strict ways of doing things so that they can experience the bottlenecks in the current process.
Now, you had mentioned that the game was inspired in some extent by Phoenix Project. What was the inspiration from Phoenix Project?
Couple of things. So definitely the 3 ways of DevOps, the learning that comes from that was an inspiration. And then the way how the book described the old way of working. I could connect with it very strongly because I just went through the experience going from a developer to a DBA manager. And so seeing how the things are different at both ends, kind of similar painful situations I described in this novel, and because of that, it was a good connection for me.
I'm just curious, from a show of hands, who has read the Phoenix Project, or is that's a good number?
Nice.
Yeah. Anybody in the Japanese room? Did anybody in the Japanese room raise your hand if you've read the Japanese translation of the Phoenix Project? Oh, I see that. There's a few. A few have read
Alright.
it.
3名ぐらいです。
Excellent.
Excellent. So what are some of the learning objectives of the game then? Is it to really understand that third way of DevOps?
All three.
So it's all three
Yeah.
of them. Have you heard of the Phoenix Project game before?
I have heard about the game, and it is different from my game because I'm not repeating the characters from the Phoenix Project. I know that it's longer, so some companies that are willing to bring it in, they need to be aware that it's full day. And for some of the companies that I worked with, they don't have full day. They have 90 minutes. They have maybe half a day. They're not generous enough with that time.
I know that at least one company here has run a DevOps Days game, and you're right, it was a full day, and I think it was very popular. People learned a lot from it. I guess in general, whether it's the Phoenix Project game or some of the games that you've developed, why are games a good activity to teach DevOps?
Yeah, and not just DevOps. Simulation games in general, they're very good for learning because people are able to experience things, they're able to feel something in those simulations. And usually a good simulation is always mixed with opportunities for debriefing. So, which means taking a step back from the actual activity and having conversation. What did you learn from this? What did you experience? How is it different or same from the way you work today? How do you want to work differently based on what you learn in the game? So good facilitator bringing any kind of simulation would make sure that there is enough time spent on lending that learning and connecting it with the real world.
One of the things you mentioned in the keynote that's very important, and I think a lot of talks center around psychological safety. Do you think that games help foster that psychological safety among the participants?
Yes. And it's important to also pay attention to how you debrief because you could ruin the psychological safety. Right? Because if you start saying like, oh, I saw you did the stupid thing in that simulation. So why in the world you decided to do that? So that would kill psychological safety, right? So you're trying to, yes, the game itself or any kind of simulation typically will create a space where people engage with each other easier. And because they're playing together, they're doing something together, they're experiencing these positive emotions, they're starting to connect with each other better. And there is some level of trust that's getting built. Again, in a debriefing, you can deepen that by asking questions that help them feel that their voices are heard, that their opinion matter, and also making sure that even as you're debriefing, you're engaging everyone. You're not just going for manager's opinion or one person who has the most outgoing personality. So using techniques that make sure that everyone has an opportunity to put in their perspective and share their view is one way to even go deeper on psychological safety.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Now you've done more than the Lego and chocolate game. In fact, we didn't really I don't think it was mentioned a lot here because it's only in English, but you wrote a book about DevSecOps adventures. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the book is the evolution of the previous book that was only focused on DevOps is like in chocolate. And now the latest version includes additional games like Fear in Workplace, the one that we did a little bit of during the keynote, these little monsters. It also has a component that goes deeper into psychological safety, which is safety in workplace, with collection of different practices that enable this coaching conversation around fears. The primary audience for the book is trainers or coaches. So it's not a novel that you will read before you go to sleep. No, but if you are trying to do things in a more engaging way when you're teaching about DevOps, or you have challenges related to psychological safety, then those are good additional tools into your toolbox that you can pick up from this book.
So the book you mentioned, it's for trainers. Is it something that a small team or a mid-sized team might be able to try on their own to improve their own team?
Yeah, actually, that's a good idea. Absolutely, because I am describing in excruciatingly painful details, if you will, specifically so that anyone can pick up this book and run this game with the team or with the organization. So you don't need to be certified trainer or certified facilitator. You can just pick up the book and learn how to run it. It also has all the materials listed. So whatever you need to get to run it, it has information about how to set up the room, if you have different size of the team, how to debrief. There are several ideas about, just like I mentioned, using techniques that will create that space where people can contribute better. I think I mentioned liberating structures. That's one of the examples, but there are several of others debriefing techniques that I'm mentioning in the book.
Now, the game that we did in the keynote session, which I guess I helped facilitate a little bit from following the instructions. So that game, that's in the book, correct? Can you tell us a little bit? You mentioned in the keynote, but now how does that relate to DevOps? And let me be more specific. One of the things in the opening today that people meant, that they said DevOps meant, was a wall and tearing down a wall. Is fear related to the wall sometimes that people experience?
It's related to the wall a little bit, but more to the third way of DevOps, which is about continuous experimentation and learning. And fear is actually what prevents us from learning. Fear what prevents us from experimenting. Because if organization has a culture where trying something new and failing is a big deal, and you may actually get punished for failing, then people will not try, right? There's a concept that's called learned helplessness, which means that if you try something and you get reprimanded for that, you maybe gonna try one more time, and again your manager is gonna slap you, then you're not gonna try a third time. You learn to stay within kind of your boundaries and not push the envelope, or you're not gonna go beyond your comfort zone. And so having a way to help people to identify some of those fears or symptoms of fears, that's what this game does. And it also gives them a way to try out this conversation about fears. It's almost like building a muscle of having that conversation.
I think the keynote during the exercise during the keynote was very interesting, and I saw everybody was participating and hopefully had a good conversation about it. My question is, how does that work inside of a company? Have you run these? Do companies run them yourself? Can you tell us a little bit about how you might run a game like this at a company?
So couple of ways that I've introduced these games, both the Lego and Chocolate and the Fear in Workplace. I like bringing them first into some kind of meetup or a conference where people from different companies can experience them. And so then someone will connect with the game and see how it was effective. And then usually there is a good opportunity for them to come back to me. It's like, hey, Dana, we want to bring it into our organization. So that's one way. And then, definitely it helps when people give it a chance. So it's almost like if you're talking about, hey, I'm going to bring something experimental. And you heard me use the word experiment several times in this keynote, because that's one of my favorite words. And it kind of makes it easier for people to try something new. So a lot of times, one of the ways I'm able to bring things in, because I suggest an experiment. You're not going to make a big difference or change anything. We're just going to try something and see if it works or not.
That seems like a difficult thing to get into a large company. When I think of training, I think of guides, I think of training companies with very formal slides and lectures and that. How do you get past the skepticism of, say, and I don't know if, for example, you've worked with a financial institution, a bank, or anything like that, how does a large company that's resistant to change try an idea like this?
Yeah, so very similar to how I described that. Usually someone from a company like that would see me at the conference, and they will see that learning resonates, and they participate in this activity, and they see for themselves that it kind of does a much better job than the PowerPoint heavy training. And so one of the examples from about 5 years ago, when I started doing this game more frequently, was a large financial company where one of the people who were part of this DevOps transformation, they saw this game at the conference, and so they reached out to me after, inviting me to run a pilot. So kind of experiment or pilot. So let's bring you into our office in New York and see if it will resonate or not. And so what we did intentionally is that we invited people from that organization, not only the ones who are open to gamified trainings, but also the ones who are very skeptical. So we wanted to make sure that the pilot that we run will include both kind of gamers and game haters. And so by running this pilot and getting really good results, we were able to confirm that yes, it works for this particular organization in their context. And that's what, one of the examples that I shared earlier, they brought me into 11 technology hubs around the world to do this game and to train trainers so that they could scale it in their organization.
Oh, that's really interesting. So I think when I hear that, doing these games have a fast return. You as a team or as a group, getting the team trying out some of these new things can have fairly fast results, unlike maybe implementing a new technology. It could take years to see the payback.
And again, I'm not saying that this game is going to change the world by itself, right? Because if you remember from the keynote, when we bring in something new into an organization, there is a lot of change that people are experiencing, and there is this change management approach that is helpful in this case. And I was talking about ADKAR, which is awareness and desire, this is where the simulation fit in the best. So they help people see why the change is useful, how it is going to benefit them, how it's exciting, how it is helping them solve a problem that they have in today. And so that kind of paves the path for more technical approach, because yes, DevOps is a cultural movement, but you cannot achieve it without implementing automation, building a pipeline, and doing all those things. So yes, that all is needed, but the game is helping people to see why that is needed and how it benefits them.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of games and especially how they apply at work. So this is all great to hear. I could ask questions all day, but what I'd like to do is open this up to both rooms. If anybody has questions are great, but if you have comments or maybe a story that kind of adds on to what we've been talking about and you think would be nice to share, go just raise your hand. Same in the, Japanese room too. By the way, we can see the room, we can see inside the Japanese room. So that way we can help sort of switch back and forth comments. But does anyone in the Japanese room, maybe we'll start there. Anyone in the Japanese room have a question, comment, or something they'd like to add? Okay, we see one hand raised, and I guess you guys can't see it in the English room, but here we go. Let's try this.
Here we go. Excellent.
はい。製造業だとか、工場を維持する、システムとかを作ってるような会社で、失敗が結構クリティカルな損害になってしまうような、システムを作っている組織の文化って結構失敗を許容するっていうのが結構難しいというか、そういう文化を醸成するのが難しい気がしていて、そこに、そういう失敗を許容する文化を醸成したみたいなケーススタディみたいなものがあったらできれば教えてほしいなと思います。
Yes, so one of the best examples of organization that celebrates failure and promotes learning from failure is Etsy. You might have heard about three-armed sweater. And so this, if you haven't heard, it's like actual sweater that has three arms, and it's a symbol of failure. And so every year they give this award to the team that failed the most. And not only failed the most, but shared the learning from that failure with the rest of the group. And I heard about this story many years ago. And so as I was getting ready for the keynote, I was curious, do they still do that? And yes, they still do that. So which is amazing. Is it helpful? Okay.
ありがとうございます。非常に参考になりました。
Welcome.
Any questions? Okay.
Hello. Yeah, thank you. Question about this game, Fear in the Workplace. Just curious, what would you suggest to how to adopt it in a team? So I'm just, kind of imagine the example is like many team members might be skeptical, for example, about that, and the question how to engage them, and they just literally could not come up into this event, right? So like half of the team members could not just show up, and so what would you recommend to how to effectively adopt into the team?
Yeah, so the version of the game that I run today, it's a version for a large room, so many participants and very short time. So that's why the only thing we did, we had this short conversation about fears, we changed partners, and then again, we had this short conversation. So what that was intended to do is to give you a little bit of practice on how is it to talk about fears. So it was very safe because we were not talking about any specific fears that your team is experiencing. It was like literally very first way to do it. When I bring this to the teams, there is actually a set of scenarios that the full version of the Fear in Workplace has. And these scenarios, they describe things that people say in their organization if they are working in this toxic workplace that is affected by fear. And one of the examples could be, I'm not sure, I'm not the best at it, so let me ask somebody else. That's one example. Another example, and I was sharing it with Alex earlier today, another examples would be, oh, Agile, DevOps, let's just wait it out. It's all shall pass. So let's just not do anything. And so these scenarios, what I do with, when I bring this with the teams, then first I just ask them to pick a random scenario from the set and explore it further. If you were coming into the team and you heard someone say this, what kind of fears, in your opinion, they're experiencing? And so just like you had one or two cards in your hands today, people would have cards in their hands and they're playing the game. So they're trying to match these little monsters to the specific scenario. And then once they explore that scenario from the person's perspective, then we start talking about, okay, so what about their managers? What kind of fears are triggering their manager to create a space like that? Okay. And so that after doing it on this, random scenario, then I asked the team, so now let's look at all the other scenarios that are out there. Which is the one you would like to explore next? And usually the teams at that point, they pick the scenario that resonates with them, something that they are observing in their space. And it's much easier to pick it because now, first, they already had this experience of talking about the fears on these random scenarios, and also because they see scenarios in front of them. So it's almost like there is this disassociation between their feelings and what's in front of them. So it's much easier to talk about it.
Thank you. Yeah,
okay.
understood. Thank you.
Is there another question in Japanese room? Could be. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick question. Because of your game and your books, I think you have worked with many companies. And I'm pretty sure there are a few examples where you could have discovered that these companies, some of the companies might have misconception about DevOps engineering and just whole DevOps culture, just in general. And what are those misconceptions?
Great question. So in a lot of companies, what I notice is that they start with automation, right? So they come in and they say, we have to automate everything. Great idea. Have you looked at your process first? Have you tried to do value stream mapping and understand where do you have the bottlenecks? No, we haven't. Great. So maybe let's start there, right? Because automation is awesome, but if you have this very convoluted process, you're going to end up with very convoluted automated process, right? So it's not going to help you resolve your bottlenecks. And that's where being in the game helps them see that it's important to know where the bottlenecks are in your process. Because if you make developers create more Legos and build more packages, it's still not going to help the customers because your bottleneck is elsewhere. And that's another thing that in many organizations, I see even nowadays when they talk about increasing developers' productivity. That's the goal. Great, but if that's not a bottleneck, it's not going to help you. And should I talk about that AI? Is that a good? Okay. So there was an interesting slide that I did not include in the keynote because it was just very heavy in terms of numbers. But I showed it to Alex and we had great conversation about it. So I looked at some of the data that was shared in the State of DevOps report, specifically related to AI. And there was something interesting that was coming out through that. So first, you might probably have heard that a lot of developers nowadays use AI to help them generate code. In fact, there were 90% of developers that, according to those reports, 90% of developers use AI to generate more code. What's interesting is that only 24% of security engineers know what to do with that code and how to test AI-generated code well. What's even more interesting, on the operations side, for every 25% increase of AI-generated code, they see, I think it was something around 2% reduction in the throughput. And there was another number, I forgot what it was, but it was bad. So basically, the idea is that just because AI can generate more code and do it very fast, it doesn't mean that your end-to-end delivery into customer hands is going to be better. Because one of the things that both of the reports that I looked at highlighted is that because it's easy to generate so much code, we start forgetting that it is important to have that small batches going into production. And so instead of that, we now deal with this massive amount of code generated by the AI, and that causes security issues, that creates more production issues, because it's something that we need to be mindful of to make sure that we use it properly and we create enough security tests, and be also ready to handle it in production. And again, remembering that one-piece flow is, a good state to get to. Is that helpful? Okay.
I think I would love to hear from someone in the Japanese room about maybe somebody who's had experiences with games. Excellent. Yes, please.
一つ質問してもいいですか？川口です。ダナさんと、出会ってからもう10年くらい経つんですけど、ダナさん以外のいろんなアメリカ、ヨーロッパから来ていただいたスピーカーの方とかにいつも質問しているんですけど、特にダナさんに聞いてみたいなと思ったんです。で、どういうことかというと、日本と、アメリカの会社、特にマイクロソフトの知り合いがいて、マイクロソフトの牛尾さんという知り合いがいて、彼と話しているといつも、日本の会社というのは、偉くなると、社長とじゃなくても、上層の経営陣になると、なかなかエンジニアリングが分からなかったりとか、あと、ソフトウェアが予定通りにできないということそのものがあんまり理解できない、うまくできない、納期通りにできないときには、何かケアレスミスをしたのか、アホなことをした、バカなことをしたのか、みたいに思ってしまって、いや、もう納期が必然だと、いつまでも、ここの時期までに絶対作りなさいと、作らなかったらどうなるか知らないよっていうような感じのプレッシャーを受けるということがまだ多い感じなんですね。で、ケント・ベックの話とかを聞くと、アメリカでもそういうところはまだ全然あるということらしいですけど、ダナさんから見て、アメリカの会社さん、アメリカで働いてる会社とお付き合い多いと思うので、この15年ぐらいでその状況って少しでも変わってきているように見えますか？もしそうだとすれば、日本にいる我々もそれを見習って変わることを結構期待してもいいのかなと思って、ちょっとダナさんどう思うかを少し聞いてみたいなと思いました。
That's a very interesting question. And what I'm observing in the recent couple of years, I would even say past year, there was actually more focus on increasing developers' productivity and finding ways for them to work faster, produce more code, and basically deliver on time. And so it's almost like there is a setback. And if you remember the Atkar model, that last step of reinforcement, it's almost like someone stopped putting attention to how important it is to actually deliver code iteratively and get feedback from the customers and adjust the schedule based on the feedback. So it's almost like there was a rollback of that a little bit. So I don't know if I want to say that Japan needs to copy US, probably not. But I don't know. What do you guys think? What do you see? Do you see something similar? Do you see something different?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I know my response, at least for the US perspective, is that it's the thing that has helped everybody wants something done on a schedule. And the solution to that, at least in the larger US companies that I work with, is make those things smaller. So it is, yes, it might take you 2 weeks or 4 weeks, but it's not 2 years or 4 years. So the smaller things are, the more room for error. So that's been the big shift I've seen a lot over the past 15 years, so to say.
15 maybe, but I'm looking at the past year or two, and I'm seeing a different trend. I don't know if you noticed that as well.
Oh, as far as getting increase of productivity, I personally I think the AI thing drives a lot of strange productivity.
Right.
So I don't know. I think my take on AI is right now we're sort of at the beginning of a hype cycle. So there's a lot of flex and a lot of interesting expectations going on. My opinion on that. So.
Yep. And my response might be a little bit tinted by the fact that I'm currently working with a very traditional organization. And so for the past couple of years, so what I'm seeing there might be very different from what the rest of the industry is doing. But, I'm also reading what, other companies like Spotify, for example, how they're changing their way of working a little bit more towards being focused on schedule than they were in the past. So who knows?
Oh, all right. I see we got a question here.
This one is, it's just gone out of the side of my head. Oh, it was earlier on. What was the fear that you had, Alex? It was a success something?
Theater. It was, oh my gosh.
Success theater?
Success theater.
Yes.
Have you ever experienced when you're coming into a company, you do the chocolate block Lego kind of workshop, and then a company goes, oh my gosh, this is amazing, and they go away. Have you ever gone back and found that they are essentially performing success theater with that kind of method? And then how have you kind of handled or worked with them to avoid the success theater that they, we're doing DevOps, everything's going well, and everyone's bought in, but they're not actually doing it? And how do you sort of open their eyes to that?
So success theater has to do a lot with the way how information flows from the individual contributors who are on the front line and doing the work and towards the management. And so a lot of times as people report up the chain, the information gets filtered. And so what ends up happening is that people on the top of the organization, they have this very rosy picture of how things actually work on the bottom. And so that's where it becomes a problem, because people here make very different decisions because they think that things over here are working one way, but in reality, they're working differently. So to your questions, have I gone back and worked with the leadership? In some companies, yes. In some companies, I'm only there doing that initial stage of awareness and desire generation, and then it's the internal coaches that continue working with the rest.
Excellent. So we have time for one more question or comment. So if anybody in the Japanese room would like that opportunity, just raise your hand. And if not, I'm not seeing anybody just yet. So anybody in here want to sort of give another? Oh, excellent,
Okay.
Sasa-san.
もしよければ大丈夫ですか？
Please.
はい、なんか今日話を聞いて、楽しいゲーム性のあるアクティビティをするのは、なんか文化とかを変えるのにいいなと思って、やってみようと思ったんですけど、なかなかうまくやれるかなっていう、なんかどんなことを気にしたらうまくやれるんだろうなっていう不安があるんですけど、何か旦那さんからアドバイスとかありますかね？
Yes. So find a group of people that is your trusted group and try it out first with them. So you need to be able to run the game with confidence, and trying it out with this small group first will give you that confidence. Okay. If you have any kind of events in the organization that you're considering, if you have something like lunch and learns or community of practice or some kind of meetup like events where you can bring something in and run it just as a session. So no pressure, we're not changing anything yet, we're just running this game that I've seen at the conference or I read about in the conference. So it's kind of very low stakes, no pressure to, no commitment to change. Let's just, run the game. So kind of sneak it in. That's my advice. Is that helpful?
ありがとうございます。はい、
Okay.
身近なグループで、身近な何かちょっとしたところでやってみるみたいな、そんな感じですかね。はい。ありがとうございます。
Yep. Excellent. Thank you for the question.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, this is fantastic. We will be doing our closing ceremony in a few minutes, so make sure to get your last drink. But thank you very much for this interview, Dan. It was fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.